I don't know what the figures are with regards to Anthony Joshua, Jake Paul, but clearly Anthony Joshua and Jake Paul are massive branded names that have such a massive algorithm push. So even if you look at search engines like YouTube and things like that and Google, Netflix is pairing its name with Anthony Joshua, with Jake Paul, and these are massive machines. So Netflix is huge on its own. So is it taking over boxing? Now, as we all know that Netflix is competing in the boxing jungle, figuratively speaking, and the money is like flowing exponentially. It's flowing. So if we take, say, something like the Tyson Jake Paul situation, I believe it brought in over 60 million viewership. 60 million. Now, if attention is currency, then this is a huge move in the right direction for Netflix. And Netflix, of course, they platformed the Canelo Bud Crawford fight. What was this fight? This was a fight for boxing purists, but it also brought in other audiences. What were those other audiences? So you had like the Mexican audience, you had the American audience, etc. And the viewership for this fight, slightly lower, but it was still 40 million. And taken on its own, that is an astronomical figure. I don't think other boxing platforms are even competing on that level. That 60 million, 40 million level, that's another level. So, this is very significant, and Netflix really made an entrance here. However, to understand if Netflix is the African elephant in the jungle, because the African elephant is the strongest animal in the jungle, we need to understand and process and comprehend its business model. Or what is the business model of Netflix? They're not selling pay-per-view buys, they are selling effectively subscriptions. So then the question formulates, or the question becomes, how many subscriptions were purchased based on the fight? So not only how many have been purchased, that's separate. How many were purchased based on the fight? Now, unfortunately, when we talk about the Canelo Bud Crawford fight, we do not have that data. But what we do have is gate revenue, which is the ticket sales. So I've seen a number, and the number is, again, astronomical. I've seen a number of like 47 million. 47 million. Now, that is completely insane. Remember, the attendance for this fight was 70,000. So the live gate, from a layman perspective at least, was a success. Obviously, you have to deduct all the additional expenses, but from a layman perspective, that is phenomenal. So here is a reasonable question. So Netflix had 41 million people, 41 million viewers. How does 41 million viewers turn into concrete revenue? This is a rational and reasonable question to consider. It's a reasonable question to ponder. Well, of course, we have the concept of subscriber acquisition. So if we have a 2, right, let's say we have a 2 to 5% sign-up conversion, this would be 800K to 2 million subscribers. So a 2 to 5% conversion of the 41 million is 800K to 2 million subscribers. So remember, that revenue is reoccurring. It's reoccurring because it's a monthly subscription. So it's rolling January, February, March, April, May, June, July, etc. Now, this is important because think of when you buy a book, you buy a magazine. It's a one-time payment. So you go into the bookshop. You look for your favorite book. You see it. I like this book. You purchase it. You only pay once. But when you get Netflix, it's reoccurring revenue. So what does that mean? It means, say, if you have the cheapest tier, you don't just pay $5 this month, you pay for next month. Okay, so we've described that. But what's important about that is a customer can have the economic potential of being $500 to $2,000 to $5,000, depending on how long they have the subscription for. So that's a really interesting business model there. But then the question becomes, is Netflix winning in the boxing jungle? Because Netflix competes in many jungles, but is it winning in the boxing jungle? Well, they're winning the numbers battle, but DAZN, for example, a competitor, has a very unique boxing ecosystem, or has a boxing ecosystem like other boxing channels. Netflix turns boxing matches into serious cultural events, but DAZN has weekly boxing output and arguably has a significant regular impact. It doesn't have the massive cultural impact that Netflix has with these single events, but it has that ecosystem which is consistently pumping out content. So in a sense, you can say that the Zone has a better product, but Netflix is creating these massive cultural events, which gives it a legitimate entrance into the boxing jungle. So when you analyze this, you kind of think to yourself, what is Netflix's next big move, or what is its projection for 2026, specifically within the boxing context? So how do they keep growing exponentially? What are the fighters, or because I guess you got the boxers and then you got the actual fights, could they tap into other massive superstars within the boxing sphere, or could they invest in trying to develop an ecosystem, or is it about just having these single, once every quarterly or once every 6 month massive fights? And where are those massive fights? Where are they going to come from in 2026? It seems to me, from an outsider looking in, that the money is there, and the viewership is there, and the sponsorship is there, in terms of sponsors who want to attach themselves to these type of large events, because like we've stated, the attention is currency. Now, I guess one of the advantages that Netflix have over others is, yes, there's a subscription in terms of whether it's, I don't know, £5, £10, £15. I think there's different tiers. However, other competitors will have subscriptions and pay-per-view charges on top of that. So I think Netflix has this angle that I think audiences, let's be honest, people don't want to pay anything, but they would rather pay monthly than pay monthly and then having to pay a pay-per-view price on top of that. So I think that gives Netflix a unique angle, and clearly the money that they can generate, or the money that they can pay the fighters, is enticing, because obviously none of this can come together, none of this comes into fruition without tempting fighters with massive amounts of cash. And it would appear that when we look at the sample, so you look at the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul, 60 million, over 60 million household viewership, that has exceeded expectations. So from a viewership perspective, it's exceeded expectations. How that translated into economics is hard to tell, but like I said, the attention has exceeded. Then you have the Crawford Canelo, and I would have thought the attention would have exceeded there, even though it was less than the Tyson Jake Paul. It's still an astronomical figure. I don't know what the figures are with regards to Anthony Joshua, Jake Paul, but clearly Anthony Joshua and Jake Paul are massive branded names that have such a massive algorithm push. So even if you look at search engines like YouTube and things like that, and Google, Netflix is pairing its name with Anthony Joshua, with Jake Paul, and these are massive machines. So Netflix is huge on its own, but by attaching itself to other massive boxing brands, Netflix doesn't only build itself up generally, it's also building its boxing presence. So I'm actually intrigued. I'm intrigued to see, what does Netflix do in 2026, and will this rise continue? And are they looking to compete with the competition in terms of to take out the competition, or are they going to just be alongside the other competition? So maybe all these other boxing platforms can operate in their unique space. So you've got these other platforms that have unique boxing ecosystems, and then Netflix comes every quarterly or every 6 months with just a massive event that kind of shakes up the algorithm and shakes up the boxing world and the general audience. So maybe there's a space where they can all operate within the jungle, as opposed to one side takes over another side. It's interesting, that's putting it mildly, but it also has the potential to create big boxing events that people want to see. So this could be really beneficial for the consumers and for the boxing purists and for the general audience that are just tapping in for the entertainment. Just wanted to make a final point, and that's to acknowledge that, yes, we know that Netflix has a lot of money, so that's evidenced. Well, it's evidenced by all of the transactions. To get Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, that's a heavy economic transaction. And then allegedly we had the Canelo 150 million. Now, I believe that 150 million wasn't for one fight. I think that was for a deal. But still, 150 million is a massive amount of money. However, here's the important point. It's not just Netflix that have money. Their competitors also have substantial investment and large amounts of money. What does that mean? It means that just because you have the most money doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win the battle. So money's a part of the equation, but it's not the only part of the equation. And that's why other platforms that have a boxing ecosystem, and when we've got a boxing ecosystem, what does that mean? That means weekly boxing content. That means boxers that are in contracts. That means they have relationships with promoters and managers. They have a significant stake, or a significant stake. They have a significant stake. And what this might mean is that each boxer brings a massive brand. Think of Tyson Fury, huge brand. Usyk, huge brand. Crawford, now a huge brand. Canelo, huge brand. Anthony Joshua, huge brand. The list goes on and on and on. But it's not necessarily just about the brand. It's the connectivity of the relationship with the brand that they are fighting. So, for example, Anthony Joshua is a huge brand. Jake Paul is a huge brand. But when you combine it, you get an even bigger brand. So when you combine the Netflix, Anthony Joshua, and Jake Paul, you combine those three ecosystems together, it becomes massive. However, what might be most important is the power of matchmaking to deliver fights that people want to see, and those fights deliver. They deliver the entertainment that people want, and it might be more a case of you don't only have to win the economic battle in terms of paying the promoters, paying the managers, and paying the fighters. You have to win the battle of putting on the fights that people want to see, collaborating with the correct brands, and then those fights delivering on the promise. So the fights delivering entertainment, and also having an ecosystem that can really promote the fights as well, because you need to be able to promote the fight, promote the intensity, and then deliver on the promise. So you have to have the marketing machine, and then the product has to live up to it. So matchmaking is important, marketing is important, obviously money is important, the boxing ecosystem is important. There's many different elements here.